Hi everyone, it's Jill Foster here for Penny Black with another video in our series from Stamp to Stunning. We're taking a new stamp or any stamp that you have in your stash and taking it to stunning in just 3 easy steps. The first is just to stamp and color it in. So the stamp that I'm using is Warmth and Wonder, two really gorgeous images in this set. And the way that I'm going to color mine in is with our Penny Black liquid watercolor inks and our brush set. On screen here are the colors that I'm using today. And I will have on hand just a cup of water, some paper towel, and my palette. If you want more information about the Penny Black watercolors, my palette, all the things to know about that, I will put a link to a playlist of videos all about that, how I set up my palette, about each color and painting techniques. So that'll be linked for you down below. But I'm just grabbing the colors that I've chosen for this card and putting a little dot of that ink into the palette to start things off. Now I stamped my image from the Warmth and Wonder set onto Canson 140-pound cold press watercolor paper using Memento Toffee Crunch ink, and this will give this a nice no line watercolor look, but it will be very easy to see what I am painting on, which is what I like. Now I'm going to start by putting the turquoise color all over sort of these longer pine branches. So we have a sort of a mix of greens within this one stamp, which I really love. And so I'm just going to start by putting this turquoise all the way down, not worried about too much about shading, but just getting an overall light sort of base of color. And if you're looking for a good palette for greenery and Christmas, these colors are really wonderful for that. And I will put a link to our blog post down below that shows each one of the cards that you'll be seeing in this video today. And it also includes that picture that you saw at the beginning that listed out the watercolors that are being used on this card. That image will be on that blog post too. So if you see anything you love, you can go to that blog post and everything is listed for you underneath each individual card photo. Now what I'm doing is I've picked up our grass watercolor ink and I am sort of flicking that on from the center of the image to the outside edge. And I'm doing this while that was still right on top of the turquoise. And I'm also using a smaller brush to do this. So our brush set has multiple sizes. They all have beautiful, nice, fine tips. And I am just using that to kind of start from the center and use a sweeping, sort of flicking motion following those pine needles. I'm just continuing to do that till I'm happy with the look. And I love what that little touch of turquoise on there does. It just, there's something about that color I feel like makes all the other colors next to it really pop. So I'm happy with how that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and dry it just using my heat tool. And just go right over the top here. And I'm just pulling in a pine color here, using that very fine tip paintbrush just to darken up the center. And then I'll also use that sort of flicking or sweeping motion from the center out with that pine color. And that really adds a lot of depth to the entire design. So now I'll work on these leaves. So I'm first putting down a layer of the grass and just painting that pretty much over the entire leaf. I picked up the ink from the palette and put it where I wanted it to be darkest, sort of where this leaf is going underneath the other one. Rinsed off my brush, patted it dry, and went back to blend. And then I'm also going to bring in some of that pine color to darken that up even more in that shadow area. Rinse off my brush, pat it dry, and go back to blend. And I'm kind of pushing some of that ink towards that darker area. I like how it looks, so I'll use my heat tool to dry that off. Sort of freeze it in time. Next, I'm using Cardinal to paint in the berries. And what I usually find is they'll do shading on their own. When I pick it up from the palette at first, it will be darker, and then if I just keep painting, it will lighten up. And then I'm also going to put just a touch of peach on a couple of those. It'll mix with the cardinal, just give some variation to those reds. Finally, using that very fine tip brush, I'm going to go over this portion of the stamped image, and that is using our chocolate colored ink. Now, if you didn't want to do any of these real fine bit of stamping, you could just also stamp this in a brown waterproof ink like Ranger Archival watering or Acorn ink, and then you wouldn't have to paint over the top of this if you didn't want to. Now at this time when I was painting this image, I didn't know what orientation I was going to do the card. I think at this time I thought it would be coming down from the top right hand corner, but I ended up turning it landscape to finish off the card. But there it is once it's all painted, and now we're ready for step 2. So first is just stamp and color. You can color it however you like to color, colored pencils, watercolor, markers, whatever you like. Then we're going to do some stenciling. So I've gone through our background basic stencil set. There's a variety of sizes and different shapes that you can do for your background, mostly circles and different size rectangles. And I'm just going to tape this onto my panel. I'm working on just a single panel, 4¼ by 5½ inches. And then once this is done, it will be the right size. I can just add it to a note card. I'm going to use some Memento Toffee Crunch ink and an ink blending tool with a foam pad, and I'm going to start off the edge and work my way on in a circular motion, using care not to go over the image that I have stamped and painted, but focusing more on the corners and edges where that image is not. I hope that makes sense. And if I get a little bit on the image, that's okay, but I don't want to go over it too much. Then the final step from stamp to stunning is some subtle or tone-on-tone background stamping. Now I've pulled this stamp from our Poinsettia Flower of the Month set, and I'm just going to take a piece of double-sided tape to help this stay in my MISTI. I found when I'm stamping on top of the stencil, sometimes a clear stamp wants to also stick to that stencil and pull up the stencil and move everything, which is what you don't want in the MISTI. And so I'm just using that double-sided tape as an extra sort of layer of keeping that still within the MISTI, and I'm taping it onto that smooth sort of background, not the paper background that you can have in the MISTI. And I'm inking this stamp up using that Toffee Crunch ink. Now I will say, as I was stamping this, I could barely see it. It was taking forever. And I have 2 Toffee Crunch ink pads. One is old and one is new, and I save both. So just a tip, if you have ink pads, it's kind of nice to save the old ones and use them for more subtle stamping. But at this point, it was just taking forever. So I grabbed my new Toffee Crunch ink pad, which is, as you can see, is much, much darker. And I use that to stamp along the bottom. So that's why you see some discrepancy there in the color. That went pretty dark though, so now I'm grabbing the Toffee Crunch and just doing some more inking on top, so that's not quite as stark of the stamping versus the background inking. It just kind of blends it all together. So the stencil is still there, and now I will take it off for the reveal. That is so fun, my favorite part, I think. So just peeling up that masking tape and revealing the card. The only other thing I did was stamp my sentiment, and then this is ready to go on the note card, and the card is complete. Again, it's a really great, this sort of stamp and color, stencil, and subtle background stamping is a great formula to follow, especially if you have a new stamp set and you just need to start. Now here I've kind of elevated that by adding that same image. I stamped and painted it the same, but used the cutout die and added it to a frame. I also embossed the background and layered that frame on top. So just another variation. Don't feel like once you've done one type that you have to stop. Now as a little bonus here is another card that was created with a stamp from this same set, from the Warmth and Wonder set. So you can follow that same procedure with any of the stamps in this set or within your stash. So here's another look at that same stamp and coloring that we did in our video, but now using the cutout die and adding it to a frame. I'd love to know which one you like best, the one layer or the framed one. And then again, here are some more cards with this same stamp set. So I showed you this one in the video earlier. So this features that beautiful curved pine cone and pine image. And then here that is again down at the bottom of this card. So just lots of different ways that you can use these images. Again, you can switch up the sentiments and use them for lots of occasions. Thank yous after the holidays, holiday or Christmas cards, masculine cards, winter, thinking of you cards. You can definitely make them suit your needs. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit subscribe. We have one more video coming up in this video series, so if you hit that bell notification, you won't miss it. Happy stamping!